Morning, everyone. This morning we had a robust caucus meeting discussion on a variety of issues. Perhaps most importantly was a focus on making sure that we move forward with a continuing resolution to fund the government, which we will do later on today, so that we do not find ourselves in the midst of another reckless government shutdown inspired by the President of the United States of America. It is our hope that he has learned his lesson from the reckless government shutdown that he initiated last year, that lasted 35 days, put hardworking public employees and federal workers and their families in jeopardy and at risk in terms of their well-being because of an inability to provide for themselves and for their families. We are entering into another holiday season, and it should shock the conscience of every single American that the Senate still has not gotten its act together. So we're going to pass a continuing resolution later on today that will extend the deadline for funding the government through December 20th, and we're going to urge the Senate to do its job. Let's find common ground so we can fund the government and move the country forward in a responsible fashion. It's also time for the Senate to act to address the gun violence epidemic that we have in the United States of America. We dedicate this countdown clock to Do Nothing Donald and Missing in Action Mitch McConnell because of their failure to do anything about the gun violence epidemic in the United States of America. Shame on them. Lives continue to be lost, including at this most recent school shooting in Southern California last year. The House acted over 250 days ago on February 27th, passing and sending over to the Senate universal criminal background check legislation that is broadly supported by the American people, including a clear majority of Republicans and gun owners. What is Do Nothing Donald and Missing in Action Mitch waiting for? How many more Americans have to die before the Senate acts to do something about gun violence in America? Shame on them. Let me now yield to a leader in the effort to deal with gun violence in the United States of America. We're very proud of all that she's done over the years during her time here in Congress to advance progress on this issue. Katherine Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our Democratic House majority ran on a promise of work for the American people, and we have delivered on that promise with over 400 bills to support the needs of everyday Americans. As the chairman stated so eloquently, for the safety of our communities, we sent the Senate common sense bipartisan gun violence prevention bills 264 days ago. Our country has suffered 3 mass shootings in just the last 72 hours. For America's women, we passed strong reauthorizations of VAWA and the Paycheck Fairness Act. For our veterans, we have passed dozens of bipartisan bills and legislation to reduce barriers for women, veterans, and accessing the VA. For our dreamers, we passed the Dream and Promise Act. For LGBTQ Americans, we passed the historic Equality Act. For our democracy, we passed H.R. 1, the For the People Act, the SAFE Act, and the SHIELD Act to strengthen our democracy against foreign attacks. For our planet, we passed the Climate Action Now Act and multiple bills to protect our public lands for generations to come. For working families, we passed the Raise the Wage Act to increase the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. That is a raise for 33 million Americans. This week, we will pass legislation to protect our nurses and social workers from workplace violence. And we will pass a continuing resolution to ensure that we can prevent another reckless government shutdown. Every day, we are working for the people. Yet Senator McConnell, calling himself the Grim Reaper, still refuses to take these bills up, put them up for a vote. More than 300 bills that have been passed are stuck in the Senate. That's 80% of the bills passed by the House. 276 of these bills were passed in a bipartisan vote. Where the House Democrats have funded 10 budget bills, funding 96% of government, Mitch McConnell has passed 4. Mitch McConnell said this week that we need to have more civility in Congress. We also need the Senate to do their fundamental job in whatever manner they choose to do it. The American people deserve and demand action. They deserve a working government. And we are not going to back down until Senator McConnell does his job and puts these bills up for a vote. And we are so pleased to have a leader with us from our freshman class, someone who has spoken so eloquently on equal pay, making sure we are reducing gun violence, coming from her own personal experiences with her dad. She is a leader here in Congress. She is a leader in our caucus. And we are delighted that Congresswoman Debbie Mucarsel-Powell could join us.
Thank you, Vice Chair Clark. Thank you, Chair Jeffries. And when I was asked to come today and speak in front of you, the frustration that I felt just trying to find the words once again are undescribable. Here we are, once again, having yet another press conference to talk about another shooting in America. In the past 3 days alone, we had 3 shootings, losing 10 lives. They were daughters, sons, mothers, fathers. And I came to Congress making a promise to people in my community that I would do everything in my power to legislate common sense gun reform laws that would protect our communities. I made a promise to my kids that I would do everything in Congress to make sure that they could go to school safely. I made a promise to my sisters that I would do everything in Congress to avoid yet another family member to receive the phone call that I received when I was 24 years old. The pain and the frustration is there every single time I see or wake up to another shooting. When I hear about the shootings like the ones in Duncan, Oklahoma, Fresno, California, Santa Clarita, California, I think about the survivors like myself, like Romania Dukes, like MJ Wright, that for many of them, their pain, their heartbreak is just beginning. The mental and emotional toll that these events take on survivors is immense. We have to make sure that survivors have every resource they need to thrive. We have to have resources to provide counseling, programs to make sure that we provide mental health services that are available to them, programs to educate communities and law enforcement that after an incident of gun violence, they need to also think of the family members left behind, and programs to make sure that groups are funded to train and build survivor networks. But before we do that, we have to stop the gun violence epidemic that we see in America today. We are living in a culture of guns, in a culture where Americans love their guns more than they love their children. We must change that. The House has acted. We passed H.R. 8, H.R. 1112, a universal comprehensive background check bill. 90% of Americans are in favor of that bill, and Mitch McConnell sits in his desk completely disregarding the will of the American people, ignoring the fact that if we take action, we can save many lives. Today, I ask Mitch McConnell, the president, the Senate, to find the courage to stand up to the gun lobby and do what they need to do to protect America. We must demand the Senate to do their job.
Thank you, Debbie, for your continued leadership on this and many other issues. Questions? I don't know you guys to be a bashful group.
Wow,
Second row. Let's see, sorry.
Since you brought up gun violence, I wanted to ask about the bills that were marked up in September at Judiciary and whether you anticipate those coming to the floor anytime.
Well, that's a conversation that I know is ongoing between Chairman Nadler as well as the Chair of the Rules Committee, Jim McGovern, Steny Hoyer, and the leadership. But it's not clear as to where things stand in the context of moving those precise measures. At the moment, the House has acted. We acted on February 27th. We've acted in a decisive fashion with respect to fixing our broken background check system so we can close the loopholes as it relates to gun shows and the internet on behalf of the American people. Mitch McConnell can act today, he can act tomorrow, he can act this week. And all we're saying is there nothing in terms of the carnage that you continue to witness that will cause your conscience to say, maybe we should act on behalf of the American people? What will it take? We're going to keep the pressure on the Senate. We're going to keep the spotlight on the Senate. We're going to keep the focus on the inaction and the dereliction of duty as it relates to the failure of the Senate to act to address gun violence in America. Cheryl?
With respect to the timetable for impeachment, are you expecting to have a vote before the end of the year and a trial before the time of caucuses? And if not, are you concerned that Democratic candidates campaigning will be strapped to their seats in the Senate, some of the leading contenders, while the presidential campaign is going?
No.
No, you are not concerned?
No.
Why not?
The House has a responsibility to follow the facts, apply the law, be guided by the Constitution, and present the truth to the American people in connection with our constitutionally sanctioned impeachment inquiry. The Speaker has made clear that she is not going to put a timetable on the impeachment inquiry in terms of when it concludes, because we are simply going to be guided by the truth. As it relates to the Senate, we're a long way away from that moment because we have not even determined here in the House whether articles of impeachment are going to be recommended by the Intel Committee to the Judiciary Committee. That's the next step. Until that occurs, it's hard to get any sense of what the timeline is going to be moving forward. Second row.
In terms of the articles of impeachment, do you think that the Judiciary Committee, which you're on, should also look at things like emoluments, the Mueller probe, things like that, or do you think you guys should just focus on Ukraine when you're making a determination?
I want to let the other two members answer as well, but the focus remains on the president's stunning abuse of power that relates to his pressuring a foreign government to target an American citizen for political gain and thereby solicit foreign interference in the 2020 election, while at the same time withholding $391 million in military aid from a very vulnerable country. That is the focus. The president's abuse of power undermined our national security. He betrayed his oath of office, and he has jeopardized and poisoned the integrity of the electoral process. We've been presenting those facts to the American people and will continue to do so over the next several weeks, and then we'll see where it leads.
Thank you. I would just add to that the chairman's absolutely right. This is not about scheduling convenience or the right political time. It is about defending the Constitution. And that is our goal. And that is why we are here today in the middle of this impeachment inquiry. And the inquiry extends to 5 different committees. And we will see as the process goes forward what and if articles of impeachment look like and what they include. But we've been brought here by the actions of the president, actions that are such a threat to our Constitution, to our national security, to the integrity of the 2020 elections, that I don't see we had a choice but to act, to seek the truth, to put the facts in front of the American people, and we will see where this process ends. But there are times in history, there are times for our nation where we have to stand up and we have to be the ones who defend the Constitution. And that is a responsibility that may not fit a primary timetable, may not fit in with other things that we want to be putting out. And we are going to continue to do both, the For the People agenda and work to defend our democracy. But it can't be about our convenience. It has to be about following the truth.
And I'll just add, being that I'm one of the newcomers to this class, and I didn't come to Congress to impeach the president. I actually came to fight the gun violence epidemic that we see in this country today. But what I can tell you is that I think it's important for everyone to look at the overall pattern of behavior by the president. I also think that every week that we have these public hearings, we're learning more information, which is why we can't jump to conclusions as to which articles, if we are going to be writing articles of impeachment, what they're going to contain or what they're going to relate to. So for me, it is my duty for my constituents who sent me here to make sure that we present all the evidence that is available to us and to get to the truth so that they understand that we can't allow a president to abuse the power of his office for his own political and private gain.
No, we are beholden to getting the best possible agreement for the American people. And in that context, the voice of labor is incredibly important. We look forward to hearing Trumka's thoughts, and I expect that it'll be an exchange of ideas between Trumka and the freshman class members, all of whom have publicly indicated that we want to get to yes. But there are serious issues that need to be resolved as it relates to labor rights, environmental rights, biologics, and perhaps most importantly, enforceability. We can renegotiate an improved upon NAFTA agreement, but if there's no enforceability mechanism, then the words on those pages will be meaningless. And so we look forward to that dialogue that's going to take place between the freshman class and Trumka, and we'll see where it leads.
Are you concerned that the president or his supporters in Congress might push a shutdown in order to divert attention from the impeachment process?
Anything is possible with respect to this president, but the hope is that Donald Trump learned the lesson that shutdowns will not end well for a president who uses the American people as bargaining chips to advance his own personal gain. That would be almost the equivalent of what we are investigating right now as it relates to the Trump-Ukraine scandal. Seems clear to me that Donald Trump spends a significant amount of time sitting in the Oval Office, watching TV, tweeting on his phone, or shredding the Constitution page by page. At the end of the day, we can't allow him to shred the Constitution. And we are going to, as Donald Trump apparently doesn't understand, exercise our role as a separate and co-equal branch of government.
I just wanted to follow up on Eric's question. Do you
well, I don't want to speculate, and nobody has veto authority as it relates to the decisions that are made by the House Democratic Caucus led by Speaker Pelosi. But we are partners with the men and women of organized labor. They are important stakeholders and stand to be impacted by whatever agreement is ultimately renegotiated. And that's why the voice of labor is important and will continue to be important.
I would just add to that as the chairman said, we are partners, and our interests are so aligned because at the base of this entire agreement are American workers, and how we have a new trade agreement that protects them, that increases jobs, that makes sure that we are also protecting the environment. So our interests are aligned. No one has a veto, as the chairman said, but it is so integral to what we are trying to do and the course we are trying to correct from NAFTA.
Congresswoman, I'd like to ask you about the importance of women's voices during the public face of the impeachment inquiry. We had Jeffries testimony on Friday, and then President Trump's tweet. Another woman today, Fiona Hill on Thursday, and I'm just wondering if
I think that anytime we have women's voices, whether it be our incredible diversity within our caucus, whether it be the stirring testimony of Ambassador Yovanovitch, we see a perspective and we see what could be. We see that our life experiences are represented, and we see that women can operate at the very highest of our diplomatic corps. And to watch her have her job taken away from her without explanation, to have her challenged while she is on the stand, being so eloquent in her defense, not only of our democracy and of our Constitution, but of the State Department and the role of our country in international affairs, and what it means when you can depose a sitting diplomat, a sitting ambassador, for shady reasons, what it says to the rest of the globe and what it says to this country. And to have the President of the United States tweet at her, intimidating tweets, continuing the smear campaign against her while she's testifying. And I think the way she responded with dignity, with respect for the country and the Constitution, just shows the power of what women can do when given the opportunities, the difference that our voices make in policy, and the statement that the testimony of the women we're seeing in the public says to Americans, says to young women and girls, that you have a role in this government. And you may not see yourself in politics, but public service is important. And it is important that we have women's perspectives in public service, in forming the basic foundations of our government.
I mean, I think Vice Chair Clark was so eloquent in explaining that. But one thing that we have seen is that women leaders have stood up to the president, that women have absolutely no fear. And I believe that it will be up to women to save our democracy, to save our country, to protect our children, because our moral compass is driven by the love that we feel for our children, for our parents. And it's paving the way for other young girls and women to understand that this is also possible for them.
So another woman, Representative Elise Stefanik, has played a different role in the hearing. The president has called her a star on Twitter. I'm wondering how you assess her actions in this hearing. Why do you think she becomes so prominent?
I was saddened to see it. To tell you the truth, I think that Elise Stefanik's actions last week showed a troubling pattern coming out of the Republicans, my colleagues across the aisle, of deifying the president and working for not the American people, not their constituents, but for one person, and working to please him because it may give temporary political gain, but losing sight of what's really at the heart of this, which is an abuse of power and our need to defend democracy and defend the Constitution. And so I found that a very disturbing line of questioning, and trying to use these hearings as a way to have a conversation with the President of the United States and to gain his political favor over trying to get to the facts and the truth.
Elise Stefanik is a newly inaugurated member of the House Republican Cover-Up Caucus, and that's very sad to see. Can't speculate about that one way or the other. Last question?
You said that this is still part of the investigation stage and you're undecided on articles just yet, but all of these witnesses have testified before. There's a certain redundancy to this now, and you essentially know what they're going to say. So based on what you have heard from their testimonies in the past, do you think that you're ready to write articles, and if so, what would they be?
Well, we are still in the investigation phase, and this week will include the public presentation of information, much of which the American people and members of Congress will see for the first time, because there were 3 committees that were involved in the deposition phase of the inquiry, but not every member is on any of those 3 committees, and certainly the American people have not seen all of the evidence. I'm going to reserve judgment until all of the witnesses have testified. And the president has been given every opportunity to provide exculpatory information to explain away his behavior. None has been forthcoming yet, but he's going to be given every due process opportunity to do so. And he might consider addressing the testimony of Ambassador Taylor, who indicated, with respect to the withholding of the $391 million in aid to the Ukraine, that there was no good public policy reason, no good substantive reason, and no good national security reason. Why did he hold it up? Right now, the facts seem to suggest that it was part of some shakedown scheme connected to the president abusing his power to pressure a foreign government to target an American citizen. Well, let's see what comes forward as it relates to the witnesses this week. Thank you, everyone.